It is Tuesday, June 28th, and you're listening to another edition of the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. My name is Blair Angulo. I am joined by national recruiting analyst Greg Biggins, and we are here to discuss and to preview, dare I say, Greg, the best offseason showcase or camp or event, and that would be the Elite 11 Finals. I always look forward to this event. I feel like it allows us to stack up these quarterbacks, the premier ones, the elite ones in the country, side by side over a stretch of a few days. And it's always a prestigious event that lives up to its billing.
Yeah, no, it's a great event. Obviously, I'm a little biased. I spent a lot of time in my old student sports Nike camp, Elite 11 opening days, Blair, as you well know. So yeah, no, I know the background of the guys that put on the event. Brian Stump and the crew is a close friend, so I know the kind of work they put in, and we only see half of it, Blair. You know what? I think one of the cool things about this event is we're out there watching them throw, but there's so much behind the scenes in terms of the chalk talks. Again, that was from my background being a part of that student sports staff. Is so much about being a quarterback is shoulders up, right? And I don't mean how big your head is. I mean what's inside of it. And so they'll get these guys, on the chalkboard, man, they'll grill them, drawing up different beater coverages and what do you do this and what you do about that. And you can tell a lot if a kid actually cares about that kind of stuff. And again, from my background, kids who didn't really care about the chalk talks, about which is so important. And when I say chalk talks, it's about like reading coverages and just being able to process that part of football. The kids who didn't really care never panned out. And the guys that were all about their arm and throwing the ball as hard as they could never panned out. But it was those guys that really took to that, also had the functional tools. Those are the ones that kind of had a lot of success. So we see half of it. A lot goes on behind the scenes, but it is a really good event, and I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah, what we've been seeing over the last few years is that after every workout, after every day, they start to come out with maybe their Elite 11 at the time, right?
Mhm.
It's always a work in progress. There's kind of like a race to the finish line, and they are very open about who is out in front right now, right? Who is in the
Yeah.
clubhouse per se to be in that Elite 11. But there are times where we get to the field and we see the list and we're like, man, like he actually struggled a bit yesterday. But
Yeah.
there are things, right, that we don't see during the course of the day, the chalk talk, the classroom stuff, the leadership skills,
Yep.
all the drills that they do sometimes on the beach. Right, there are a lot of different layers to this event that make it special, and it's always one that I think allows us to take a close look at these quarterbacks and dissect little by little all their characteristics, their traits, and let's go down the list, Greg.
So Blair,
Stay with me here.
real quick. Let me jump in because I'm
Yes.
glad you brought that. I think definitely I just praised them, right? But I do have one little bone to pick, and you kind of nice little segue. So this is how they've done it in the past in terms of their scoring and their rankings. I think it's important to know. So they actually have the guys ranked 1 through 20 going into the event, right? And so they have a kind of a logarithm, if I'm using that word correctly, where they'll judge them by their junior tape, their Nike camp, or their Elite 11 performance, their upside, their projectables. They have a formula that they crunch together. And so they'll have guys rated 1 through 20 going into the event. And again, I don't know if that's how they're going to do it this year, but that's how they've done it in the past. And that's why we'll see guys who kind of after the first day are ranked 4th, and we're going 4th. The guy took laid an egg yesterday's workout. It's because going in, they already have them rated 1 through 20. And so my issue has always been, I don't have an issue with the formula or the ranking, but once they actually to pick your 20, right? But once you actually get to the event, I'm saying throw those rankings out. Everyone should start on the same level playing field. So if you're rated number 18 going into the event, you got to leapfrog 17 guys to be that number 1 guy. And obviously that doesn't happen, but it happened with Tua Tagovailoa. Like he was rated really low going in, didn't have a great regional, and he literally leapfrogged everybody and ended up winning Elite 11 MVP. But I think for people who are watching and kind of wondering why our ranking system will be different than what the student sports one is, it's because we're ranking based just off of this event only, whereas they already kind of have their 1 through 20 rated. Remember a couple of years ago, there were some, I don't want to say, screwy rankings, but everyone was like, hey, how did Caleb Williams, who didn't have a great workout, right? But he got Elite 11 MVP, and people were saying, hey, that's not fair. He wasn't the number 1 guy. He was rated 1 or 2 going into the event. So just wanted to throw that out. in terms of why our scoring system will probably be different than what you see from the student sports staff.
Yeah, and for
As you
full
were,
transparency, a lot of their invites are sent out that way as well, right? They clump in your junior film and your performance at these regionals to even punch a ticket to California. The event will take place at Redondo Union High School in Redondo Beach, California, the 28th through the 30th. It kicks off with a workout. The second day is usually a pro day event where the quarterbacks are under a microscope and they're going through a script and they're trying to hit throws. And it's a system that's scored points based. And that's how they're able to kind of differentiate the quarterbacks. And then day 3, they'll bring in a bunch of skill position players, receivers, tight ends, corners, running backs, linebackers, and do a bit of a 7-on-7 tournament as well to start, maybe differentiating these quarterbacks and seeing them in different elements. Let's run down the list. USC quarterback Malachi Nelson, Tennessee commit Nico Iamaleava, uncommitted 5-star quarterback Dante Moore, Jackson Arnold, who's Christopher Mazzini from Clemson, Jaden Rashada, fresh off his commitment to Miami this past weekend, Eli Holstein, the Alabama commit, who also punched his ticket with the highest ever Spark score ratings, Clarkson, the nearby St. John Bosco, Ricky Collins, the Purdue commit, Avery Johnson committed from the state of Kansas, Austin Novosad, the Baylor commit, who has been seeing his recruitment take off, landed a big offer from Ohio State at their camp recently. JJ Cole, Iowa State commit, Florida State commit Chris Parson from the state of Tennessee, Brock Glenn also from the state of Tennessee, he's uncommitted. Malachi Singleton from the state of Georgia committed Arkansas. Kenny Minchie committed to Pittsburgh. Marcus Stokes, a Penn State commit. Zane Flores, Oklahoma State commit. Brady Drogosh, a Cincinnati commit from the state of Michigan. And to round it out, Emory Williams, another recent Miami commitment. So the Hurricanes have 2 pledges there among the list of 20. They'll dwindle it down to an Elite 11. Is there a big storyline, Greg, that you're going to be looking at or tracking in the next few days as we cover this Elite 11 finals?
I think there's a couple big storylines. I think this is the year of the quarterback. We have 4 in our top 10. Arch Manning, who will not be there, Malachi Nelson, Nico Iamaleava, and Dante Moore. And then right outside that 4, you have guys like Jaden Rashada, who we like a lot, just committed to Miami. We have Christopher Vizina, who Clemson commit, who I like a lot, and Jackson Arnold, who I've never seen. If there's one guy that I'm excited to see, it's Jackson Arnold. I keep wanting to call him Arnold Jackson from Different Strokes fame. I just aged myself. No one probably has a clue what Different Strokes is, but it was a pretty good show back in the day. I'd never seen Jackson Arnold, but love the tape, love the dual threat ability that he brings. So I really believe, and I think I'm going to probably go on like 18 different topics right now, but Arch will not be there. And I feel that if one of these guys that's already kind of highly touted in our system, whether it be a Dante Moore, who's got production, who's got some great in-person workouts that we've seen, if it's Malachi Nelson, who we know is probably the best pure thrower, again, productive, really solid junior season. And then you got Iamaleava, who for me, I think has the highest ceiling in that group. If one of those guys were to jump up and have just a Justin Fields type camp, do we have the conversation? Can one of those guys bump Arch? End of the summer rankings come out. Or do we keep Arch and say, hey, you got to knock the champ out? No one knocked the champ out, so therefore Arch is going to stay. Or the counter to that would be, how can you knock the champ out if the champ doesn't come to anything where to compete? And I'm not saying Arch doesn't want to compete. I actually think Arch probably would want to come out and compete. But the reality is, do you keep Arch at that number 1 slot if one of these guys who we already have in our top 10, if they come out and just absolutely just kill those 3 days? Justin Fields probably had the best workout that I've seen at a camp going back to Matt Stafford, was always the guy for me. I'm not just saying that as a Rams fan. Matt Stafford probably had the best individual 11 workout of all time until Justin Fields came along. If Dante Moore comes along and he just rips the workout for 3 days, do we have Dante Moore, the number 1 guy, the number 1 quarterback, Blair? Can we have that conversation? I think we probably should. I don't know. I think I might be standing alone. We had our conversation last week on our recruiting meeting. I don't know if anyone else is really, on my side. Maybe you were a little bit, but I think it's worth it. I think it's worth the discussion.
I was on mute, I think.
Well, that's an excuse for not having my back. The mute button was caught me. You were going to support me, but the mute button was holding you back. Is that what you're trying to tell me right now, Blair?
Yeah, I'm blaming the mute button. We're back on the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. Blair Angulo joined by Greg Biggins, national recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports. We were talking about our favorite event because we get to sleep in our own beds this week out in Los Angeles at Redondo Union High School. People around the country, Greg, might be thinking, oh, it's going to be an amazing 3 days for these quarterbacks in perfect conditions. It's going to be sunny and there's going to be no breeze. But you've been to Redondo Beach before. You've been to that high school. They are holding these workouts in the early evening into the night. And we've seen how gusty it gets, how windy it gets. It gets a bit foggy as well. We get some of that marine layer. If these quarterbacks think they're going to California and it's going to be the perfect setting for them, they might be surprised. It does become a bit difficult to throw the football in some of these conditions.
Yeah, no, and I feel kind of silly. We're going to try to set the stage of it's not going to be 85. It's going to be 70 degrees. And there's going to be a little bit of breeze while those people across the country going, are you kidding me? I'm shoveling snow. Obviously not right now. But no, to further your point, it does get a little cold. I do feel a little soft for complaining about the cold being out here in Southern California. But, I honestly, Blair, I don't mind a little bit of a win. I think it gives the kids, a little challenge. You want to see those guys that can rip it. The guys that can throw a tight ball have an advantage if you're throwing through elements. And I always said, hey, that's if you can throw a tight ball. I had T. Martin tell me, he was, former USC Tennessee coach and who was on the Elite 11 staff when I was there. He said, that's a God-given gift. You either can spin the football or you can't. You can't teach it. You can get better at it, but it's just the way your wrist and your arm to follow through. It's just a God-given thing, being able to spin a football and just the way the ball comes out of your hand, it's clean. And so I think it's cool. I think it's cool to have a little bit of elements in place and see which kids can rip it through that, which kids start throwing some knuckleballs out there.
I get really excited to see the battles between the battles, right? Sometimes you have the future college rivals matching up against each other, whether that's in a 7-on-7 tournament or they're going back to back in the pro day or they're throwing side by side during the workout. We're going to be able to see and maybe get a preview of some of these future battles this week, right? Malachi Nelson committed to USC. He's a local prospect. And then you have Dante Mora, who, the crystal ball right now is trending towards Oregon. Those are two schools, two heavyweight Pac-12 programs that are swinging for the fences with new coaching staff. So it's going to be interesting to see if they have any sort of interactions. Obviously, Nico Iamaleava headed to Tennessee. You got a couple of other SEC commitments as well. I'm always fascinated to really kind of see which ones take it to that next level, right? Where they begin their rivalry, which ones are keeping it friendly, or sometimes you can kind of really see a quarterback paying attention to what another quarterback is doing, figuring out, okay, what kind of things can we expose here? What kind of things can I look at to maybe help me win a football game in 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure, at least talking Southern California quarterbacks, I know Nico Iamaleava is always coming to compete with guys that are rated ahead of him. You just always kind of get that sense. And even at, Las Vegas, the overtime event, when they played head-to-head against South Florida Express and Malachi Nelson, I mean, that Team TOA team with Nico, man, that was their Super Bowl, man. They were going all out. You could tell they were a little bit more fired up. And I always feel like Nico kind of has that chip. And Jaden Rashada is one of the most competitive kids I know. NorCal guy, always kind of feels like there's a little bit of a, maybe a little bit of an advantage for the Southern California quarterback. So he's going to go in there, I guarantee, with a little bit of a chip. How about Emory Williams, right? Everyone's talking about, Jaden Rashada, Miami. He just committed to Miami as well earlier this month. And right now, no one's talking about him. So guarantee you he's going to be watching Jaden very, very closely. And, what if Jaden comes out and has a Justin Fields type workout, which I think Jaden is fully capable of doing. Does Emory kind of say, does he kind of pick up his game a little bit of a notch? Or does he say, shoot, man, this guy over here, he's pretty good. Do we want to go to the same school? I'm curious about all those kind of conversations. We have a couple, uncommitted quarterbacks that are both have Ohio State offers. So, maybe they kind of size each other up. Brock Glenn being one of those guys. And honestly, he's an 89 rated guy, high 3-star, who I love his tape and I love his practice highlights. And I think he's a guy who, if he has a good workout, deserves that 4-star bump. So, yeah, a lot of little storylines, like you mentioned, that I'll be watching pretty closely.
One thing that I'm really interested to see is whether or not Eli Holstein can can really take his game up a different level. We already saw him do that with the testing, right? We were able
Mhm.
to see him put together the best spark score that a quarterback has ever put together in the history of the testing and of these regionals. We know that he's a remarkable athlete and maybe a bit deceiving in that sense. He doesn't look like he would be as athletic as he is, or that he would test as well as he does. His film is terrific. He had, a really productive junior season. Committed to Alabama this spring. In a way, obviously backing off of that Texas A&M commitment and jumping on the offer from the Crimson Tide. But he had, a few other schools really chasing him. Florida, I know, wanted him really bad as well. And I want to see where he is among this
Mhm.
elite group. We've always talked about the Nico Iamaleavas, the Malachi Nelsons, the Dante Moores. Uh, but something tells me to never really sleep on that future Alabama Crimson Tide quarterback. And I'm interested to see how his arm talent stacks up, how his release stacks up, how quick he's able to process things. That's going to be my personal agenda, I guess. Is that's going to be something I'm going to be looking for, because I think Eli Holstein, in a way, kind of gets forgotten about. And I think we've learned year after year, Greg, never to forget or to overlook that Alabama quarterback.
Yeah, no, I mean, people are probably watching saying, "Oh, here comes the Bama bump." Blair, you're kind of just you're already trying to set the stage, set
I'm
the table
setting
for
it
that.
up.
No,
I'm
I mean,
giving I'm giving our listeners some receipts.
I think when it comes to quarterbacks, the one thing, and obviously when we do our rankings, we're projecting to the NFL draft, and we see guys drafted highly. The one thing that always, almost 9 out of 10 times, probably like 19 out of 20 times, is that high school production matters, right? More than any other position, it's high school production matters. Talk about Eli Holstein. This guy is a state champion quarterback who's been very productive. And there's something to be said about being able to win some football games, right? And you could say, oh, didn't, this guy doesn't win because he didn't have his talent around him, or he's playing in this league, or, the receiver dropped the ball, the O-line's terrible, blah, blah, blah. End of the day, did you win the football game? That's what a quarterback is always judged by, right? That's why Tom Brady's the GOAT over a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who probably has more physical talent. So Eli, again, we saw him in Vegas. He broke that spark record, like you said. He doesn't look like a guy that would jump, break the record. That's not an insult to him. He doesn't look like that. But man, he's productive, and I do think he's going to come out. No one's really talking about him as much, and I do think he's going to come out a little bit of a chip, and I think he's going to probably have a really good weekend.
Before we go, Greg, any final thoughts or any final little tidbits about this coming week at the Elite 11 Finals at Redondo Union High School, and maybe something that you'll be looking for?
I mean, honestly, I'm going in with an open mind. I don't want to come in and just be focused in on like I said, the big 3 or 4, whatever you want to call it, those top 4 guys. I want to really watch everybody, because I think sometimes people, when they're evaluating any position, you kind of get caught up in, okay, I need to watch the guys that I have rated highly, and then you automatically want to say, oh, they did great, so then your ranking looks better, right? I think it's self-serving. I don't want to do that. I want to go in there with an open mind. And if the number, guy who we have rated the 18th best, if he goes in there and lights it up, then shoot, let's prop him up. Now, I say that to say this. I am curious if one of those guys who is in the discussion in our top 10, who's in that discussion for maybe being, the new number 1. And I'm getting, this isn't taking anything away from Arch, but I just feel like if one of those guys does really have a great 3-day week, I'm going to be watching them to see, okay, do they deserve to be in that conversation? Let's have that conversation. So I'm going to be kind of open mind, looking for that 18th, 19th guy. We'll also keep an eye on those top 2 or 3 guys that have the body of work, and see if they can maybe jump up and be in that conversation with Arch Manning for number 1 spot overall.
Yeah, the Elite 11 Finals kickoff later on Tuesday. You can track all the coverage on 24/7 Sports throughout the week. It runs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. A lot of quarterbacks that are committed, and some really intriguing prospects that are right now not committed as well. So it's going to be a fun week in the sun. It's going to be a fun week in the mist, in the shadows, whatever we want to call it, out in Redondo Beach. And we're going to do it all at 247sports.com. Greg, thank you so much for joining us, and can't wait to team up with you again this week.
Always looking forward to it, Blair.